What's up, guys? Skippy Africanus here, and welcome back to another Cards Week episode, this week featuring the M1906 Guard cartridge. So now before we get into the history, use, and all that stuff of this rather interesting round, we will first do what we always do and take a look at the head stamp, which on the top we can see FA, that stands for Frankfurt Arsenal, of course, the manufacturer of the casing, and on the bottom we have a 310, the 3 standing for March, and the 10 standing for the year, 1910. With Frankfurt Arsenal casings, at least a little bit past World War I can't remember the exact date, they would always include the month along with the year of manufacture. Now, I had mentioned that this was the year, or the date of manufacture for this casing, and that is because the Guard cartridge actually ended up using second-rate casings and bullets. Meaning not only components that for one reason or another were considered unfit for military service, but also components that they may have just had lying around in warehouses and such, just extra components they had on hands, they would use to make these cartridges. And also aside from this, they would of course go about reloading these spent casings when they did use them. Now what exactly is a Guard cartridge? Like what distinguishes this from, the standard 30-06 that would have been in service at the time? Well, with these, they utilize the same bullet that would be found in the standard M1906 loading, a 150 grain flat-based bullet. Where these mostly differ, aside from the obvious fluting of course, is in the actual powder charge. Where the standard service munition was utilizing a standard charge of rifle powder, these Guard cartridges featured a rather light charge of pistol powder, greatly reducing the power and range. This was done in order to reduce collateral damage when having to use the rifle in an area populated by civilians. However, it did not relegate the rifle to a mere pea shooter, with the cartridge still being accurate and effective within a range of about 200 yards. Honestly, to give you a good idea on how this cartridge is, supposedly they use 9 grains of bullseye powder for the load. With that same powder, at least from memory, use around 8.7 grains for a 357 Magnum cartridge, give or take. This is also, of course, with a similar weighted bullet at 158 grains, so that kind of gives you an idea of this cartridge performance as kind of being like a 357 being fired a 1903 Springfield. Now obviously we do have the date on the head stamp to tell us that this example at least had to be assembled sometime past March of 1910. However, should you have a date that is under that number, the main giveaway that this cartridge was assembled at least past that date is the 6 flutes present just below the neck. You see, for the Guard cartridge, there existed a few variants that would be adapted as problems were noted. To start off, the cartridge would be introduced as the caliber 30 Guard cartridge model of 1906, and it would be a simple 30-06 cartridge featuring a black case to distinguish it as different from standard ball ammunition. This case blackening had a tendency to wear off with repeated handling, however, and thus demanded a more permanent means of identification. This is where we would have a change to the casing made in 1908, featuring 5 rings in the middle of the casing. This change would not last long, however, as it was found that it had a tendency to rupture at these rings when used specifically in machine guns. These rings were done away with in March of 1910 in favor of these 6 flutes. Now, we can obviously determine that this is not one of the first 2 variants, as aside from the obvious date on the casing, it also is fluted. However, one thing I cannot determine is if this cartridge is that 3rd variant or the 4th variant that would come about in 1916, as that 1916 variant looks the exact same externally with the flutes and all that. Where it differs is its internals, as it was found that with repeated reloading, or in some cases just general loading of the cartridge, that the bullets tended to be loose inside the casing. This was solved by implementing a deeper groove for the crimp to get a better hold of. And this would be the last variant to be designed and would see use until 1933, when the M1 Guard cartridge would be introduced. Now, normally we go over how a specific cartridge performs, however, while there exists a decent amount of information and even load data for this specific variant, I can't seem to find the average FPS that projectiles would travel at. I can find general performance, like, that it had an accuracy equivalent to normal ball up to 200 yards, or that you had to do weird stuff like set the elevation on your 1903 to 650 yards for 200 yard and in shooting. However, past that, I can't seem to find how fast these bullets were exactly flying. So for now, I think that is going to do it for this week's Cards Week episode featuring the M1906 Guard cartridge. I hope y'all enjoyed the video as much as I personally enjoyed making it, and I will see y'all next time.